You're going to go to the Peck Merle Cave. This should be in purple. You won't need to know Peck Merle Cave for the test. But in 1922, three brothers or three friends, two brothers and a friend, were exploring the cave by their house. And they had been exploring this cave for years. 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And they found this. So what does this look like? Yeah, it looks like a horse, right? And much like the Venus of Willendorf, I think that the artist saw a shape in the rock that reminded them of a horse, like the horse's head right there. And I don't think that that was carved by the Paleolithic artist. So they saw the shape of the horse's head and then made the horse or drew the horse around that to make that fit. And you can also see the handprints. Now, they wonder if the spots on the horse are meant to reference a specific spotted horse, which is common in the era, or are the spots in on the horse of the artwork, is that some sort of symbolism, or is it some sort part of some sort of religious ritual? Nobody knows because you can't ask them. They didn't write it down. And they found horses on all kinds of walls, and people have connected the horse drawings to actual horses that are in the region where they were found. So besides horses, what do you see in this picture? Right, you see the hands. Somebody said hands. So handprints are very common in Paleolithic cave painting. And what is going on is that they will put their hand up on the wall and then they'll blow the pigment through a tube, maybe a reed, maybe it's a bone, some sort of a tube that they make. And it's like the first spray paint. All right. And then when you take your hand away, it leaves a negative image. So why are these hands here? Nobody really knows. There's a lot of guessing going on. Are they the signatures of a cult, or are these important community members? Is it kids playing around? Is it the artist's signature? Is it, oh, cool, look what I did, and then that's it? And in this image right here, it shows the Paleolithic artist using that tube to blow the pigment around the hands. Now, if you look at the walls, if this is a Paleolithic artist, what's wrong with the pictures that he's drawn? Right. Yeah, there's people. All right. So you have bows and arrows up here. You have somebody throwing a spear down there. All right. That's likely what they were doing, but the Paleolithic artist didn't depict humans. And this one, the artist is using a paintbrush. Paintbrushes didn't come until far later. So this one is incorrect, but still funny. All right, so now we're going to Lascaux, and Lascaux is a name that I want you to know. When we're going out of the house to get into the car to go somewhere, I tell my daughters, I say, like one caveman said to the others, let's go. And they roll their eyes at me because it's not a funny joke. All right, so this is the entrance to the cave. So in September of 1940, Marcel Ravadat, who's 18, and he was with his dog, Robot. That is an awesome name for a dog. In fact, I think my next dog is going to be named Robot. All right, Robot fell into a hole, and Ravadat returned with friends to go and get the dog. And the dog went 50 feet down a shaft. They thought it was a secret entrance to a nearby mansion, but it turned out to be a cave that had significant cave art. And like I told you at the beginning of the period today, if there's two things that I want you to remember about prehistoric art, it's Venus of Willendorf and the Hall of the Bulls. In these illustrations, the animals are different size, they're different kinds, and they're going different directions. And they were also painted at different times. So this is not all one big picture of at one time and at one place. This is not a herd. All these animals are unrelated to each other. What kind of view are we looking at these animals from? Starts with a P, ends with an E. Yes, people are saying profile view. That is correct. So it is a side view of them. But if this is a side view, look at the horns. Are the horns at side view? If we look at a bull with horns from the side view, and then we look at it from the front view, is that what we're seeing here? No, like the horns are a front view and the bull is at a side view. All right, that is incorrect. And that's what we call twisted perspective. And remember how I told you that Paleolithic art almost never has people in it? Lascaux Cave has one of those almost never moments. This figure right here is a person. Now, granted, he has a bird head. All right. Anyways, we have a bison over here that's been disemboweled, and over here we have a rhinoceros. And then he has a bird on a staff. So they think that he is some sort of a magician or shaman or something. And also, experts believe that this is some sort of narrative. It might be telling a story, and it'll be one of the first times that that Paleolithic artists tell a story. So the hunter or the shaman disembowels the bison and then gets run over by the rhinoceros. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just guessing here. All right, and my favorite meme from prehistory: when your sick cave painting of you killing a cyber tooth only gets 7 ooga boogas, and he has a confused unga bunga look on his face. I think that's funny. All right, now we're going to go to the Chauvet Cave. Don't need to know the name of this cave. I want you to know Lascaux is the only cave I want you to remember. All right, and this one you can see it's a tourist area, right? It's all built up, and you can see all the tourists outside because inside it looks like this. Has anybody been to Natural Bridge Caverns over in San Antonio? Yeah, this is what it reminds me of. All right, and in this cave, there are images of animals. Hundreds of animals. And there's something unique going on at this particular cave and not the others. We'll get to it in just a second. What kind of animals do you see here? Yeah, that looks a lot like a bear up there, and this one looks like a bear, and that's like some sort of a dog looking right there. These look like felines, like lionesses or cougars or something. But this is the unique thing at this cave. What did this artist do that the others did not? Especially, I'm talking especially about the Lascaux cave, the last cave that we look at. Say it louder. That is correct. She said they did the profile view correctly. Look at those horns on the steeds up here, and they are correctly at a side view. And they're even overlapping each other, which is unusual for this time period. So these artists were a little bit more observant than the previous artists. All right, and then what do you see here and here? Yeah, spots. Hey, you know what this reminds? And this is artists. They are blowing the pigment through a tube onto the wall. And you know what this reminds me of? When you're at the hardware store or at Walmart and at the spray paint, people are testing the colors of the spray paint. That's what it reminds me of. All right, we're going to look at Neolithic art. We're still in chapter 1. So in your notes, you can make a little header for Neolithic art. You can put it at the top, at the header. I also want to remind you, as you're making your notes, writing the chapter at the top. We're still in chapter 1. You can also write Neolithic art up at the top. You can write Paleolithic art at the top. All right, the Neolithic era. What does neo mean? New, that is correct. What does lith mean? Stone. So we're talking about the new Stone Age. And the general date for Neolithic era to start is 9000 BC. Although all over the planet Earth, the difference between Paleolithic and Neolithic happened at different times. For example, in the Americas, the Neolithic era began somewhere between 2500 BC to about 500 AD, or in Northern and Western Europe, 4000 to 1800 BC. In Central Europe, 5000 to 2000 BC. In East Asia, 6000 to 2000 BC. In Europe, 7,000 to 2000 BC, and in Africa, 8,000 to 2000 BC. So it happened in different times around the globe, but for our purposes, it basically is at 9000 BC because that is when the ice melts and there are changes in human behavior. What I really want you guys to understand is the difference between Paleolithic and Neolithic. Paleolithic lived a nomadic lifestyle. In order to eat that night, they had to kill their food that day, or they had to pick their berries that day. They did not have a way of storing that food for a long time. The food would go bad if they didn't eat it right away. So if they're going out and picking berries, after a while, there's no more berries. Or if they go out hunting for the animals, after a while, they kill all the animals in the area. There's no more animals to kill. So then they have to move to a new part that has berries and animals for them to eat. And these guys, these Paleolithic people, are just surviving. That's their whole life, is just surviving, eating and making babies. The Neolithic era, they learned how to build fences and keep those animals in fences and breed the animals so that you always have animals. You never run out of animals. So there's always a food source for that. They learn how to farm and grow things. So there's always vegetables and berries and fruits that you can always eat. That way you don't have to continuously have to move, because they had to move, they would break it down and take it with them. Whereas in the Neolithic era, they don't have to move. So they build a house, and whenever that house gets rickety, they build another one better than the first. Or one person in the village gets very good at building houses and buildings, and every time he builds one, he improves upon it. And so the civilization is then be able to thrive, and you begin to get villages and cities. And that's a big difference between Neolithic and Paleolithic. All right, so we are going to go to Asia. Where is Asia on this map? Upper right. There we go. All right. This whole big area is Asia. Asia is really big. All right, and now we're going to look for Western Asia, which is also known as the Middle East. Where is the Middle East? What's it close to? That's right, it's close to Africa. And we're going to look for Israel. Where in the Middle East is Israel? Right, it's right on the coast. A very tiny little country right on the coast of the Middle East. All right, so here is, and then we're going to look for the West Bank. All right, the West Bank is on that side. And then inside the West Bank, we're going to look for Jericho. And there is Jericho. All right, now look at this photograph of the city. And Jericho is this hill right here. All right, this is the ancient city of Jericho. Tel Es Sultan. It's a hill in the middle of the city. It looks like a natural hill, but it is not. It is man made. And it is the former city of Jericho. So let me explain a little bit about why a city looks like a hill. The ancient civilizations do not have the technology in architecture that we do. They made their buildings out of mud brick. You take a bunch of mud and you form it into a brick, you let it dry, it becomes a brick. And these mud bricks are not very stable. They're more stable than the previous material they were using, but they're not all that great. This is not the kind of architecture that's going to last for thousands of years. So what happens is they build these buildings out of mud brick. Eventually the building collapses, and what do? They build right on top of it. And then that collapses, they build on top of it, and that collapses. And that's why you have a hill, right? That hill is a series of collapsed buildings and cities. And you can see it in the layers of the mud brick. Excavations reveal collapsed buildings on top of collapsed buildings. Eventually, it makes a hill. But we're not interested in the city. We're going to look at one particular building on the city. So Jericho was a walled city. It had a wall around it, and there was one tower on the city, and a very simple um, construction. It wasn't simple for them, but it was this cylinder with a hole in it where it had some stairs. And at the time, this was the tallest building in the world. If you look at this figure right here, that gives you a sense of, it's like from there to there. What would you say that's what, 30 feet? Maybe 25 feet? That was the tallest building in the world. And I'm showing you this piece of architecture because this is in a long line of people trying to build the tallest building in the world. Right? The Egyptians were the tallest building in the world for thousands of years, and then the cathedrals, and then the Eiffel Tower, and then skyscrapers, and so on and so on. That humans are continuing to try to build the tallest building in the world. And in the ancient world, this tower, the one that is below ground level, was the tallest building in the world. And that's the Tower of Jericho. This structure is unlike anything found before. It's the first tower. It's tremendously technological achievement for the time period. And they only used stone tools to make this. And like I said, it's the first in a long line of monumental architecture. 28 feet tall. I was close. I said 30 feet. I said 25 feet. It is multifunction. That means it was most likely used as a guard tower, but also for religious ceremonies. to look out for spotting animals and spotting enemies. And the high position was to watch over their own people as well. It was also an astronomical observatory, and it was also a show of strength and power. Can you imagine that people, non citizens of Jericho, walking up to the city and seeing a tower that they've never seen before? And like, whoa, how did you guys build that? They must be better at building than we are. This was also a public meeting place. And the tower is the first attempt at an organized civic manipulation. All right, so there is a stairwell inside the tower that goes up to the top and lets the somebody go from the interior into the top of the tower. There's a mountain nearby, and when it casts its shadow on the tower on June 21st, the very tip of this, that is an important mark or important time for the people of Jericho. Like I said, ancient Jericho was a walled city. All right, we're going to Turkey now. Where's Turkey on that map? That is correct, right above the Middle East. And in fact, Turkey is almost in the exact center of this map. There's Turkey right there. We're going to go to Turkey, and we're going to go to that area indicated by the red dot. If you travel there now, this is what you're going to see. This big open building in this field. And as we get closer, you look inside, it is an archaeological dig. What this place is, this is PALEOLIThic. Now, PALEOLIThic is a large village or a large city. It had a population of 6,000 people and roughly 1,000 buildings. However, the unique thing about PALEOLIThic is there were no streets. So, use your imagination. How do you get from one part of the city to another if there are no streets? Walk on top of the buildings, and that's what they did. All right, this culture, there are no windows, no doors on these houses and on these buildings. There is a hole in the ceiling with ladders, and that's how they get in and out of their abodes. And if we look at a little bit closer, you can see the ladders that gets people up on there, and then they have a covered entrance, a covered hole that they would get into and out of their building. And this is a recreation of what a room would have looked like, but we're not interested in interior decoration. What we're going to look at is the paintings that are on the walls. One little bit of information or one little fun fact for PALEOLIThic, they buried their dead underneath their house. So this is a painting on a wall, and it's called Deer Hunt. Now, this is a Neolithic work of art. How is this similar to Paleolithic art that we've seen? How is it similar? It is, right, it's on a wall, yes. How else is it similar? Right, it has animals in it, yes. And how else is it similar? Yes. And what I'm looking for is the profile view, all right? It's a side view of the animal, all right? And that's how it's the same. And even if you even look, it's that twisted perspective where the antlers look like we're looking at it from the front, but then the head is at the side. Now, what makes this different than Paleolithic art? Yes, absolutely. It's the people. All right. We didn't have people in Paleolithic art. This is the first time that humans make a regular appearance on wall art. With Paleolithic, people were very rare. With Neolithic, they are very common. What we see here are groups of hunters, not individuals. And with Paleo, they painted with their fingers on a rock, and with Neolithic, they used brushes on plaster. So they made their houses out of mud brick, and then they put plaster on top of the surface to help keep it sturdy. And again, you can see more of this Neolithic art with the profile view and the people. All right, now this painting is a bit unique. It's hard to see what it is, so we'll look at a recreation of it right here. And you can see it even a little bit better here. What do you think these squarish things are? Those squarish things that are painted on the wall is the city of Kutal Hayuk. Those are all the buildings. And if those are all the buildings, then what is this thing right here? It's okay. I don't expect you to know because it's very abstract, but does that look familiar? All right. This is the mountain that's right next to Kutal Hayuk. So they painted the mountain there. What we're looking at is the first landscape in art history. And landscapes become very popular in the 18th century, 19th century. All right, moving on. One of the figures that they found in Kutal Hayuk is this figure right here. It's called Seated Woman of Kutal Hayuk. Many sculptures were found. Now, if you look at her and look at her body type, what would you say about this figure? Say it louder. Right, exactly. The word that comes to mind is fertility. All right, this would be a fertility goddess. And my notes say it's a large and fertile mother goddess in the process of giving birth while seated on the throne. Approximately 6000 BC. And when it was found, its head and the rest of the right side were missing. The current head and the hand are modern replacements. And it's made of barely fired clay. So when you cook clay for very hot temperatures for very long, it becomes very strong. But if you don't cook it for a long time, if you don't cook it at extremely high temperatures, it's still very brittle, which would explain why it is broken. But they don't have YouTube videos to show them like what temperatures to put their ovens at. All right, speaking of ovens, these were often found in oven walls, house walls, floors, and left in abandoned structures. The figures often show evidence as having been poked, scratched, or broken. And it's generally believed that they functioned as wish tokens or to ward off bad spirits. All right, who is this guy? Yeah, that's RoboCop. All right. Yeah, I do want you to write down RoboCop. I do want you to write down the date. This is important. And RoboCop will show up on the test. The reason why RoboCop will show up on the test is because the actor who played RoboCop in the first two movies, his name was Peter Weller. And in 2004, he got his Master of Arts in Roman and Renaissance art. And in 2014, he got his PhD in Italian Renaissance art. So RoboCop is my favorite art historian. I've read some of his articles that he's written. I've enjoyed what he has written. And the reason I'm telling you guys about RoboCop is that this is the first time this semester, and it won't be the last time. But when you see RoboCop pop up on the screen, he stands for an art historian. And if I know who the art historian is, I'll put the name there. All right. So in my mind, art historians are RoboCop. All right. And so I will tell you what typically art historians will say. All right. So that is why you will see RoboCop throughout this course. All right. And so art historians generally believe that this is a fertility goddess. And if we look at it from a different angle and then from the back, yeah, she's quite large. All right, moving on. On this map, where is the United Kingdom? Right, it is right above France. All right, now if we look at the United Kingdom is made of different countries. Which one is England? What color? Orange, yes. Orange is England. Does anybody know what the one above England is? Scotland. What about this green one next to England? Wales. And then the one up above. All right, this is Ireland. Then this would be Northern Ireland. Yes, that is correct. All right. So we are going to go into England and we're going to go to a place called Wiltshire. And within Wiltshire, we are going to look at Stonehenge. All right, Stonehenge was built in phases over thousands of years, or several centuries, sorry. And it is an astronomical observatory, and it is an accurate solar calendar. The first phase was a series of ditches with small stones or pits around in a circle. And this was 5,000 years ago. Phase two was about 4,500 years ago, and it included these stones in a semicircle. But what we know of as Stonehenge looks like this as phase three. And these were when the large stones were placed. Now, Stonehenge is more than just this circle of rocks. It is much larger. There's a larger outer circle and other mounds. There's a North Barrow and South Barrow. And you notice these other stones that are around, and all of these stones are lined up with the sun. They're aligned with the sun on specific days. A couple of the important stones are this one down here is the heel stone. And there are some keystones up here. And for example, the winter sunrise and the sunset, you will be able to see through the gaps in the stones this way. And the extreme moonrise, you can see through the stones if you look this way, and the moon set. And then winter solstice and the summer solstice, you can see with the through the gaps in the stones, and it makes a line here. So it's all aligned to the stone. So if you look through, this would be a sunset, and you can look, and the sun sets over the heel stone. Am I right? Are we looking west? There's no, that's north. If that's north and that's south, then off to the right, that would have to be east, right? Correct? All right. So then if we're down there and looking at the heel stone, we're looking east. So that's sunrise, not sunset. Okay. And then here is that heel stone that is the distance from, and here's what it looks like without the sunrise. By the way, most days in England, this is the weather right here. So even on the day where it's supposed to be that you can see the sunrise, most likely it'll be cloudy because England is mostly cloudy most of the time. All right, so I know what you're thinking. I bet you're wondering, how did they move those stones? Right? All right. Because that's what you guys think about. All right, so there's a lot of talk about it's aliens that move them. but scientists have pretty much figured out how they were moved. And most likely they were moved by large groups of people pulling the stone and then putting logs underneath to help them roll. In the summer, I watched a video showing they put the stone on these logs as a rail, and then everybody was able to have these long poles, and they put the poles underneath the stone at an angle, and they pulled it down, and with everybody pulled it down, that raised the stone up, and then they moved the poles, and that projected the forward, so it looked like a rowing motion, and they were able to move it that way. So different people are thinking about different ways that it could have been moved. And these stones, while like infinitely heavy, could be moved by large groups of people. So then how did they set them up? So here I found this online where it shows there's a ditch dug or a hole dug where they used a leverage system to angle the top up, and then it just falls into place, and then they use a leverage system to pull it to make it erect, to make it at 90 degrees. Then to get a capstone on top, they raise it a little bit and put objects under it, and then raise it a little bit more and put objects under it. So they raise this end and put some objects in, and then they raise the other end and put some objects under it, and then they build the next level and then the next level. Nobody really knows how they did it. Here is how another person thinks that they were able to put the capstones on the top, by a ramp where they could pull them up and then slide them over onto the tops. But this architecture that we're looking at right here, because this is our second piece of architecture, is that right? The first one was the Tower of Jericho. This is our second piece of architecture, and this piece of architecture gives us our first post and lintel system. And we're going to be seeing post and lintel all semester long. And I can guarantee you that post and lintel will show up on the test. The vertical parts are the post. The horizontal parts are the lintel, or the part is the lintel. And what's happening is that gravity is pushing the lintel down that's being supported by the posts. They have to be careful not to make the distance between the posts too long, because if they make it too long, what's going to happen? It'll break in the middle. So these are very quite crude. There's not a lot of space in between the posts for the lintel to go on. So as people get better at architecture, we see a post and lintel system here. These are the lintels, these are the posts, and they begin to make the posts narrower and the distance between the posts wider. And even in modern architecture, we still use a post and lintel system. These are the posts and these are the lintels. Now this is steel, so steel is much stronger than wood and stone. It's not as brittle as stone, and it doesn't decay like wood does. So they can build higher and stronger with steel. But my point is to show you that architects are still using the post and lintel system that was given to us by the Neolithic designers. All right, and then at the top, there's these, it almost looks like a Lego. It's a giant Lego is what we're looking at. All right, the little nodule fits into the hole, and then there is a groove, so it all fits in nicely. All right, this concludes chapter 1.